Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 240 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the topic of stories and how they might be shaping your leadership. And I'm not talking about fairy tales or other stories like that. I'm talking about the stories that you tell yourself about the situations in your life, which may impact your leadership. Not sure what I'm talking about? That's all right. We'll unpack it in this episode right now. So we all have stories that we carry with us wherever we go. And I'm not talking about stories that we read or the thing that happened to us last week. The stories I'm referring to here are those that we tell ourselves. We create them and use them to help us make sense of the world around us. Now, these stories are also powerful influences on our behavior and therefore our leadership. Now, I first came across this particular idea of stories through my coaching training, and it has been a useful way to help me process events and create a more positive and constructive mindset. So in this episode, I'll take a look at some of the common stories I find leaders telling themselves and the influence they can have on our leadership behavior. Now, the excellent news I have for you is that we can control and are responsible for our behavior as leaders. But there are lots of things about ourselves that we cannot control. We can't control our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, nor can we control our past experiences or how our upbringing helped to form our beliefs, biases, or other ideas about how the world works. Some leaders are on autopilot. Something bad happens and they have an explosive reaction. What we need to do instead is to take a pause. You might still be unhappy about something happening at work, but you can control how you respond to it. So being mindful of the stories we tell ourselves is one way to help us take a step back and reflect on what's really going on for us. And there's a related article I'd recommend you check out about how to manage your emotions for better leadership. That will be on the show notes page, which for this episode is thoughtfulleader.com/240. Now, when I'm working with leaders, they often have stories that are influencing how they think about themselves and the people around them. And the story that we tell ourselves usually comes from an observation that we have of our environment. So here's some examples. What we observe might be a colleague didn't communicate with you. The story we might tell ourselves might be, well, they don't respect me. Or a team member might make a careless mistake. The story we might tell ourselves is, well, they don't care about their job. Someone comes in late to work, we tell ourselves they're not committed. A colleague doesn't greet you in the morning. We tell ourselves the story that they're upset with me. Your manager wants to see you in the office. And the story we tell ourselves is, something bad must have happened and I'm in trouble. A team member keeps asking you questions that they should know the answers to. And the story we tell ourselves is, they're lazy. Someone speaks over you in a meeting. And we tell ourselves that person's rude and disrespectful. Or we might see your manager keeps giving you work when you are overloaded, and the story we tell ourselves is that they don't care about your well-being. The problem with these sorts of stories is that when we believe them, we take action that might not be appropriate to the situation, or we don't take the action that could be beneficial. If our story is that a team member doesn't care about their job, we're likely to take very different actions than if we believe the team member doesn't have the skills to achieve the quality of work we're asking for. Now, in one case, we'd possibly be resentful and dismissive, and in the other, we might be more supportive and try to help them learn. So what do we want to do with these stories? Well, first thing we need to do is to notice them. What story am I telling myself about this situation is a good question to ask yourself. And then we can think of some alternative stories that could also make sense. For example, if your team member made a careless mistake, your story might be, well, they don't care about the work. Another story that might also make sense could be they were distracted because of something happening in their personal life. And the point of this activity is not to guess the correct story. It's to get you thinking in a more objective way so that you can be more curious about what might be going on for your team member. So now you can approach the situation with a clearer head and a sense of curiosity, which will help you to find out more about what might really be going on. Otherwise, your emotions may run rampant and have you behaving in a way you aren't proud of. Now, it's true that your original story might be correct, but our stories are often based on our biases, assumptions, and other factors, so they aren't always reliable. Believing the first story in your head may have you heading down the wrong path or addressing the situation with a less than helpful attitude. So that process again, and a little diagram I'll put on the show notes page as well, thoughtfulleader.com/240. Notice. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself? Then challenge that story. Create an alternative story that also makes sense. And then you can approach the situation with a more curious mindset about what might be going on. And remember, this process of challenging the story is not about trying to justify someone's bad behavior that you may have seen. It's more about getting you in an emotional and mental state to be able to respond in a way that's more constructive and that you can be proud of. So it's not trying to let people off the hook for bad behavior. It's really about managing ourselves. So I'm interested, have you noticed any stories that you were telling yourself that turned out to be false? Share your examples with the Thoughtful Leaders on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/240. And while you're at it, if you think I can help you with some of your leadership challenges or to achieve your leadership goals, you can apply for a complimentary coaching call with me on the show notes page. Go there to apply for yours. And I can't coach everyone, but if you don't apply, we'll never know. Thank you for listening to this episode today. I'd encourage you to notice those stories you're telling yourself and start to challenge them. So keep up the thoughtful leadership, notice those stories, and I'll be back next week.